Okay, so we see some challenges. Time for collaborative planning, something new. Okay, I see typing. Great. Students will fully understand what they should be learning. Clarity of proper goals and criteria. Great. Just instruction based on individual needs. Wonderful. So we can see what some of the challenges are, and we know a lot of it is really related to teacher buy-in. We want to support teachers in using these tools, but we are aware that a lot of what we're doing may seem like one more thing to them, and that is a concern. So we will discuss that this session. So just as a reminder, sessions 2, 3, and 4 focus on different attributes of formative assessment, particularly those that are foundational and are introduced early in the same module.
Today's session highlights leadership understandings and strategies that can support teachers' careful planning for formative assessment, particularly their articulation of a big idea or enduring understanding that will be explored and uncovered through learning, and they're specifying the learning goals and success criteria that will frame their instruction for each lesson. As introduced in the first leadership support session, today's session will be framed by the questions that guide formative assessment. Where are we headed? Where are we now? And how do we close the gap? The guiding question for today's session is, how can we support teachers in effectively developing and using learning goals and success criteria as they implement classroom formative assessment? By the end of this session, you will have deepened your understanding of the critical role of careful planning for formative assessment and the place of learning goals and success criteria, not only in that planning, but also in instruction with students. You should also be better prepared to address potential challenges related to supporting teachers in this work. You will have given some consideration to how the formative assessment planning tools and processes may or may not fit with other planning tools and processes already in use at your school.
I apologize if we giggle, but the lights just turned down in the room we're in. And one more time, we're not moving around enough apparently. So you'll know you're being successful when you can do these things. So notice the I can statement. I can explain what learning goals and success criteria are and the role they play in formative assessment. I can clarify how learning goals and success criteria relate to each other and to other lesson planning approaches currently used by teachers. I can recognize and address potential leadership challenges related to teachers' use of learning goals and success criteria. And I can identify leadership actions that can strengthen my school's current stage of implementation. So please type in the chat box any questions that are emerging for you around any of these particular success criteria. So I guess, what do you see as a current area for growth out of these success criteria for you and your school? And go ahead and type that in the chat box, or again, if you're calling by phone, you may talk. Okay, I see people typing. So again, what specific success criteria listed here are of concern to you? Thank you, Jason. Growth. Teachers should begin to work closely with students to develop the success criteria together. I think that's an area of concern for a number of people, how to encourage teachers to include students in that process. Okay. Great. My teachers have already been posting those in shows. I believe learning goals, just taking it one step further. Discussion at our COP yesterday was very positive in shifting to learning goals and success criteria. Great. Okay. So,
where are we headed? To be useful, learning goals and success criteria must be understood by both teachers and students. This idea is central that once students internalize the learning goals and success criteria, they can take next steps in their own learning, receive feedback, and apply it to their own learning and give effective feedback to others. While there has been effort to have teachers post learning goals, the formative assessment process ensures that students understand the goals and that students are clear about what it will look like when they have reached their learning goals. This level of transparency is largely new to teachers. The video previewed during the asynchronous session has teachers unpacking and clarifying learning goals for a high school ELA class. This type of planning is the first step, as it allows teachers to clarify and refine their learning goals and the precursor foundational knowledge that is necessary for students to be able to meet these challenging learning goals. In the next slide, we will examine that video.
And just to join in with that, with Jason's comment in the chat box, it's great. Learning goals need to become more kid-friendly, and that is something we will look at. So we're going to watch the video as a group one more time. We'll do it just like last time. It's posted on our blog. I'll share that link. I'll try to get you there, but you have to press play on your own, and then we'll come back together as a group. And on the bottom of the agenda are the specific questions that we will be discussing afterwards that you can take a look at. And I believe at the bottom of the agenda it says slide 12, and it has the 3 questions. So I'm going to go ahead and take us to the website. It'll come, whoops, that's not at all what I just wanted us to go to. It will hopefully take us to the website. Gotta love technology. And you can scroll down and press play on your own. I'll mute my computer so that you're not hearing my version of the video, and we'll come back together just as it finishes. apologize if I accidentally took you away from the video. If you are finished, please go ahead and raise your hand. Okay, great. So we're going to go ahead and start discussing the questions. I'm going to attempt, really hard time doing this, putting in a new page so that we can, let's see, new whiteboard page. Let's see if this will work. So that we can view those questions and discuss them. Yay, I am as tech savvy as I think I am. So I'm going to go ahead and paste those questions for us, and if you can respond to them either in the chat box or if you would like to verbally respond, and I'm going to keep asking someone to do that. That would be fantastic. So the first question, oops, posted them all separately. What did teachers do to explore the learning goals and success criteria for their unit? The second one, what did these teachers, or what did you notice in particular about how they plan for engaging students in understanding the learning goals and success criteria? And the third one, what examples did they give that helped us understand how these ideas would be reconsidered at various points throughout the lesson? So you can either verbally share out with us, type it in the chat box, or if you can remember how to do this from the last time, you can click on the A symbol and click on the A paragraph that comes up and type your responses directly below the question. So you have 3 different ways to contribute to the conversation. Why am I not seeing that? All right, so number 1, we saw planning with the end in mind. That's great. They collaboratively discussed the lesson, knowing what they needed the students to learn and be able to know at the end of the lesson. Also, teachers thought through what the learning would look like. That's great. The teachers worked together to develop the big idea of the unit and then develop 2 high-level expectations that relate to the big idea. They plan to share the big idea with students. Okay, great. So the second one, what did you notice in particular about how they plan for engaging students in understanding the learning goals and success criteria? So they had a collaborative approach, planned with the end in mind, explored a big idea or essential question, wrote expectations in kid-friendly terms, embedded many expectations into the lesson. Great. They worked to create an activity where the students created their own rubric. I do want to go ahead and acknowledge that this is a high school class, but these same practices can be used in really any grade level, but especially the middle school level. Okay, I see a few other people writing. Student input was essential, very much so. I see a semicolon, so I don't want to move on. But looking at number 3, what examples did they give that helped us understand how these ideas would be reconsidered at various points throughout the lesson? Right, students were expected to be an integral part of the lesson.
Bye.
I hear Lindsay. Hi.
Hi.
If you want to go ahead and talk, go for it. What examples did they give? Okay, so we will keep going. We seem to have lost Lindsay's audio for a sec there. So looking ahead, there we go. So where are we headed? So you should have had access to the unit planning template and sample formative assessment unit plans. I pushed those out. They are specifically for middle school classes. So step 1 is covered in module 2, and that is developing big ideas, learning goals, and success criteria. So this unit planning template is a graphic organizer to help teachers ask themselves the kinds of questions that they saw in the teacher planning video. So it walks teachers through each step of the formative assessment planning process, and we ask that teachers use this unit planning template during this period while they're sort of getting used to these ideas. Once they understand these planning elements, they really don't have to use this organizer, but we know it helps. And it helps to have peers with whom to do this kind of lesson planning as well. So looking at what your district currently uses or what your school uses, what connections do you see between this, this template and between what you already use in the schools? And that file is called Mill Examples of Formative Assessment Lesson Planning. So are there any connections between what you currently do and this planning template? And go ahead and type that in the chat box. Great, I see people writing. Okay, Brian, and that is, I want to say Charles County. Content standards and learning goal sections are similar to a template we used. Great. We had some participants from Washington County this morning with the elementary group, and they use a planning template that's quite similar to this one. I see other people typing, so I'll wait till they press enter to move on. Okay, our district does not have a lesson plan format that must be followed, but I see many similarities. Experience as the curriculum grows, we often discuss common misconceptions during our collaborative planning session. Great. So we're going to actually go through each of these planners just to sort of examine them, and we'll talk more closely about some of the concepts that your teachers may struggle with and how we can reinforce this work. Okay, great. So we use more of an essential question format in place of the big idea component. Great. So let's go ahead and take a look at the templates. And you should have those files, middle examples of formative assessment lesson planning. Again, afterwards, all of these materials will be both on the blog for you and saved in, and I believe that they're mostly on the file exchange already on Blackboard, but they will be on the blog for your access. So the first one we're going to look at is the middle school writing. So if we look overall, we're looking at academic content standard, grade 7 language arts, write persuasive compositions. And typically in one of these planners, you will see the Common Core standards that apply, or the Maryland Common Core College and Career Readiness Standards. I apologize. So write persuasive compositions. State a clear position in support of a proposition or proposal, and to support the position with organized and relevant evidence, and anticipate and address reader concerns and counter-arguments. This should be something you're all quite familiar with. So looking at the big idea, this is the overarching concept that should apply. A well-written persuasive evidence or essay convinces an audience to believe an idea or take an action by appealing to emotion, ethics, or reason. Persuasive writing convinces others by including strongly worded evidence such as examples, facts, opinions, statistics, and quotes. The learning goal: students will understand the elements of persuasive writing. They will compose a concise and effective persuasive thesis statement, establish strong support for the persuasive position using specific examples, facts, and details, end a piece of persuasive writing with a call to action, and utilize the steps of the writing process. And then they have the success criteria, which are directly linked to those learning goals. They can tell the reader why this topic is important or controversial, and so on and so forth. And included in this template, let's see if it's neat. Okay, so we see typical misconceptions. And that part is really important because we know that when we are introducing or doing a questioning or really looking at something a little deeper, there will be misconceptions along the way. And so in this unit planner, the teachers go through and outline what the typical misconceptions could be. And often you'll see below that ways to address those misconceptions, which is very useful to plan out ahead of time because we do know that deliberate planning is a really key part to successful formative assessment. So we're going to move on to the next one and talk a little bit more deeply. Moving on to middle school health, academic content standards. The student will understand and demonstrate ways in which his or her health and well-being can be enhanced and maintained. The student will understand and demonstrate how to play a positive, active role in promoting the health of his or her family. And the student will know how to identify products, services, and information that may be helpful or harmful to his or her health. Now your teachers will have seen these templates, but this is a great one to show to teachers outside of the typical content areas because I've told you before, I was a theater teacher, many of us feel left behind. And this is a great way. It does not have Common Core standards, but those could be incorporated as well. So the big idea is the very broad general idea. Having a healthy life is dependent on the choices I make each day and is supported by my understanding of facts related to nutrition and healthy eating. You see the learning goals and the success criteria. Now, a question to you that I always have when I'm looking at this is how could this be made more student-friendly? What are some ways a teacher could take this unit plan and think about how they could make this a bit more student-friendly in their terminology? So go ahead and type in the chat box ways that the teacher could make this language more student-friendly. So again, looking at the middle school health. template. How can this be put in more student-friendly language, or what could be done to really incorporate students into this process? Okay, I see people typing. Oh, that's great. Thank you, Lindsay. Have students choose how they will reflect the I can. I see more typing. Oh, and we have a paragraph. Thank you, Brian. Transitioning the big idea component and description into more of a how it connects to your life format language. Great. Make the relevance connection more explicit. And I see one of our Collins typing as well. So just my personal takeaway when I first viewed the video, it seemed like they really put the onus on the students to determine what the success criteria was. And I realized, again, that was a higher level class, but they had those learning goals, they had the big idea, and the students really had to determine how they could prove that they accomplished those learning goals. So what does that look like in their actual class, and what does it look like in practice? Examples of work can be shown along with goals and criteria. Great, having a visual component to the text. And so moving down to the misconceptions, you know, another way just to incorporate that the misconceptions can be there is those pre-assessments that you do before the unit starts, because that does tell you quite a lot about what the students know or what they think they know. So let's move on to middle school environmental studies. And this is a larger view. This one's slightly different because of that. By the end of grade 8, students will identify environmental issue questions that can be investigated using resources and equipment available, and will collect information from a variety of resources, conduct investigations, and develop possible solutions to their investigations. So this is a very large view. This is quite basically the end of the year goal. With the big idea, electrical use has personal, social, economic, and environmental impacts. We can take action to reduce the impacts of electrical use. And so again, I think the same emphasis would be on incorporating student input into the success criteria from the learning goal. And so I'd like to take a look at middle school mathematics, because we know that math and ELA tend to be a focus. And so I think it's important to take a look at the two core areas. We saw the writing, and now the 8th grade, no, the middle school, it does not say exactly what grade, mathematics. So by the end of grade 8, students will, and it goes through all the different skills that they should be able to have and all of the elements that they will use that year. It explicitly pulls out the different Common Core standards that apply to that general concept. And you know, we do encourage teachers to work with the standards, unpack them, and really understand them. And it's important that they understand how both the overarching big idea and the goal interact with those standards. And so we have the two different big ideas for geometry and measurement. They go over the learning goals. They'll identify and measure the height of a cylinder, identify the base of the cylinder and its areas, explain how height and volume are connected, and generalize how to find the volume. And then they have the success criteria for those. So taking a look specifically at these learning goals, what recommendations could you give to the teachers who are crafting these learning goals? What are some ways that they could make these a little clearer and tie them, because if you notice, the learning goals and the success criteria are quite similar. How can they really strongly delineate between the goals and the success criteria? And go ahead and type that in the chat box. So what advice would you give to the teachers creating this unit planner on delineating between goals and criteria? And you can put this in general terms, because I do not come from a math background, and if you don't, then we're not going to get into the technical language. But in this case, how would you guide your teachers in delineating the language of learning goals and success criteria? And go ahead and type that in the chat box. Thank you, Lindsay. Perhaps goals should be broader and success criteria steps along the way. Great. Anyone else care to chime in? How can we teach our teachers to more clearly delineate between the goals and criteria? So what should be the large difference between them? So Lindsay says goals should be broader and success criteria steps along the way. That's great. Great. Chunking the success criteria to include more specific milestones in the learning process. Great. See more typing. All right, so moving forward. So where are we headed? Well, this clip showed us students developing and co-constructing that success criteria for the unit on graphic novels. Halfway through the unit, the teacher directly involves the students in developing that success criteria for their graphic novel design through the use of exemplars and discussion of key elements they've learned earlier in the unit. Let me share what has just been typed. Success criteria should show students how they're achieving the goals. Exactly. Great. And the teacher planned for how to engage students during each aspect of this lesson. So a couple discussion questions that we're going to go through, and I'll put them up on the whiteboard again to type out or respond in chat. How might your vision of having students involved in the development of success criteria be sharpened by the practices in this video? What's gained by having students actively engaged in the task? And how might this idea apply to students at other grade levels or subject areas? What might be done from a leadership perspective to have exemplars used as a regular practice? What are barriers to using exemplars as students, and how would you as a school leader help resolve those barriers? So I will put all of those up. Again, it will take me just a minute. And now we have this wonderful tool. There we go. Okay. So I'm going to paste these here for you, and you can either respond in the chat box, you can talk if you're so inclined, or you can respond on the whiteboard. There we go. So again, how might your vision of having students involved in the development of success criteria be sharpened from practices in this video? Go ahead and type directly in there if you would like. Okay. So actively engaged students are more on task and take ownership of their own learning. That's very true. Students recognize that they're supposed to learn and are more likely to be goal-oriented and focused on a learning activity. Exemplars can be useful for teachers to know what they're looking for and for struggling students to get an idea of what they're doing. Exemplars also can be copied by students. Very true. Students will know exactly what they're expected to know and be able to do. And it increases accountability, independence, and student buy-in to the learning process. So what are some ways that you either encourage or have exemplars incorporated into your teachers' work? I know at some schools, teachers actually collectively plan and keep those materials together so that you have those exemplars for specific assignments year after year. So what are some things that you do at your school, or maybe certain teams do at your school, to have those exemplars of work? Oh, someone's typing it just disappeared. I saw something about Edmodo. Great, we use Edmodo to store exemplars. We use Edmodo to store exemplars and collaborate among grade level teams and across grade levels. That's great. We may be asking you to help us explore Edmodo more, Jason, just to warn you. No problem. Great. And let's see what's in the chat box here. We build our exemplar folders every year. We take some of the most recent student work and have gallery logs. It's a great strategy. So now looking forward, especially since you just said what you do, so where are we now? Let's take stock of what we currently observe in classrooms. So you were asked in your pre-session work to complete a chart that looks like this, indicating the extent to which teachers in your school demonstrate particular practices related to using big ideas, learning goals, and success criteria. Some teachers may show evidence of using these practices, or perhaps they use similar practices. We're going to have another discussion and note the enabling factors associated with successful implementation. Let's see what else is in the chat box. That's great. From a leadership encouragement perspective, we could highlight the teachers using this best practice at team content staff meetings. This may encourage other teachers to check in with the highlighted teacher to learn more about how to best use exemplars. It's a great idea. So we're going to keep this as our small group discussion. So what does current classroom practice look like in comparison to these descriptors? Are there any emerging areas of strength? And what factors have contributed to teachers' strengths or progress in these areas? Again, I'm going to put up a blank whiteboard. I encourage you to type directly onto the whiteboard if you are so skilled. Or go ahead and chat or type in the chat box. And you can write the number next to it. So let's go ahead and try one more time to do this lovely cut and paste. I swear in this day and age we should have better technology. But as my mother says, it is what it is. There we go. So what does current classroom practice look like in comparison to these descriptors? Are there any emerging areas of strength? And what factors have contributed to teachers' strengths or progress in these areas? And I encourage you to go back and review those specific aspects in the chart. multiple people should be able to type on a whiteboard at the same time. Not in the same area, but they should be able to type at the same time, yes. So Lindsay said, our current practices are fairly similar, although we've been using different terminology. Teachers share in kid-friendly terms their objective for the class and how students will show they're successful. I think we're lacking in the area of developing the criteria with students. Great. Teachers are just starting to use student samples to show where growth can be made. See, a couple of people are still writing. Thank you, Brian. Number 7 and number 8 on the checklist are so closely related. Current practice at my school may fall a bit short on these two. So to go back to the chart, that is develop success criteria with students so that they'll know what it means to achieve the goal, and describe the success criteria in student-friendly language. My department has a large amount of student work to use for examples, but we do not have some for every lesson. This is something that I feel that teachers can always build upon, even if they create their own exemplar. Great. So are there any emerging areas of strength? It seems that we realize that there's a need for teachers to increase their collaboration with students and to have students take more ownership. But are there areas that you think your school or certain departments are really strong in already? Okay. Lindsay said, I think many teachers here may say time is the constraint limiting their implementation of 7-8. This is a misconception, but one that is deeply, yes, I agree. People definitely say that time is a constraint. Okay, and I see a few other people typing. So what do you think has contributed to teachers' strengths or progress in these areas? So if it's an area of strength, what's contributed to that strength? If it's an area for progress, whether, maybe still room for growth, but if they're progressing on that, then what has contributed to that in your school? I think teachers see students' achievement rise when they're an active participant in their learning. The more they see students achieving, the more the teacher progresses. That's great. We move towards Common Core and NYP. Creating rich performance tasks has become a major strength for teachers. That's great. And I see Brian writing. Being open to the idea of changing their practice and seeing the immediate benefits. Yeah, that's great. So just to highlight that, I know that a lot of the feedback from the summer leadership was that the videos were really powerful and really eye-opening and encourage people to make those shifts and to see those practices and say, I want to and I can do that in my classroom. And just to remind you, those are all up on Blackboard now for you to use as you see fit. So they are there. Mr. Sticky Notes and all of the other members of our crew are on there for you to use in PD, either just with your teachers participating in SAME or with the whole group. So how do we close the gap? In your school, how will learning goals and success criteria be seen as compared to other materials currently in use? Where might there be alignment? So this is a chance for you to discuss with the group some of those concerns and issues that you may have. I also want to go back to our Blackboard discussion and highlight something that Lindsay shared. She said, participated in our first COP yesterday. And while discussing Module 1, teachers discussed changes that they feel will need to occur in the next 3 years in order to fully implement the formative assessment process. They wanted to know, will there be district-wide policy changes to grading policies in our county? We will need communication with families to discuss shifts in grading. Will we have time? And teachers wanted to know if there will be conference time with students to set individual learning targets and with parents to show portfolio-based assessments. So although these were great questions, without seeing all modules, it's difficult to answer the questions. Our district is very on board, so we should be able to work through these questions easily. And I wanted to bring these up because these are questions that I'm sure you're going to start hearing a lot of, and they're questions that moving forward our team is going to really start working on and hoping that we can assist with. So I just wanted to let you know on number 2, we will eventually, once we get a minute to breathe, be developing sort of something to disseminate to parents on what is formative assessment and what it might look like in your school. We will put something together, disseminate it to you and your district to use as you see fit. So you're welcome. That'll be great. And so a few of these other questions as well with the grading, the county grading policies, that is something that we will be talking about and hoping that you will lead the conversation of in your county, and we will be working with you to facilitate that conversation. But we're hoping that those assessment grids that we will be getting from your community of practice leaders will be something that can guide that conversation in your district. And they will be looking to you guys for that leadership. And then number 3, conference time with students to set individual learning targets. That is a great question. That is something that could be an ongoing process and really depends on how your teachers are embedding this practice in their classroom. But after the next leadership session, it will be a little clearer for you. So we're getting slightly closer to the end, and I want to make sure that you have something to think about. So these will be things that you're considering for the next pre-session. So where is there alignment with these materials, and where is there misalignment, and how can that be remedied? So you may remember the fun activity that we did in our summer leadership with those challenge cards, where you're asked to read the card and determine how you would respond to that particular challenge. So we're going to go through these really quickly. And Jason, if you could take number 1 and respond to it. Brian, if you could respond to number 2. Lindsay, and our Colin, whose name I don't know, but I kind of assume they're from Clemente. If you could both respond to number 3 in the chat box. So you ask your group of students to explain the learning goal they're working toward, and the students do not have a response. The teacher's posted learning goal is an activity. And then number 3, you observe a student team with a rubric that describes success criteria, but the worksheet they're completing is focused on something that appears to be a very different learning goal. What would you say or do next? Please write your number and respond to it in the chat box. we have response number 3. It's a great opportunity to have a discussion with the students to see if they even know there's a misalignment. Then a conversation with the teacher needs to occur. Do the students create the rubric or the teacher? Perhaps the teacher needs to unpack the learning goal with the team. That's great. Number 1, I would ask probing questions to the students to get them to think about what they're doing. I would have a conversation with the teacher about my concerns with the students not understanding what's expected of them. Number 2, take note of all positive student interactions and engagements within the classroom. Call a conference with the teacher and share compliments. Fantastic. Move discussion towards writing learning goals. Have researched a user-friendly guide for writing learning goals. Complete with action verbs and self-monitoring questions for the teacher as he or she writes learning goals. Request teacher to send rewarded learning goal the following day. Proceed from there. Number 3, teachers can tweak the worksheet or pose a new activity or task that connects to the success criteria on the rubric. Great. My other statement for number 1 is I would always go up to another group of students just a second, do a second check. But these are all fantastic responses. And these are all things that you will see this year as you're going through this process. So just looking forward, for Module 2, which your teachers will be starting some at the end of this month, most in November, the learning focus is learning progressions and the importance of collaborative practice. And these are some of the potential issues they may face. And again, you have these materials, they were pushed to you at the beginning. So just to highlight the first line in this one, because this is something you'll face, teachers may confuse learning progressions with scope and sequence documents, curriculum maps, or rubrics. Okay, and on the right, as you've had in past materials, and this is something that you got during the summer leadership, some leadership responses for you that can be delivered by you or other building leadership or lead teachers or even facilitators, just to help you in that thought process and engaging that constructive conversation. So a closing thought for today, and I love this quote by Wiggins, who's also a fantastic researcher in formative assessment. Once assessment is designed to be educative, it's no longer separate from instruction. It's a major, essential, and integrated part of teaching and learning. So, using the fun little tools that you have under the smiley face, if this is something, thank you, Brian, if you think that assessment is currently seen as a major, essential, and integrated part of teaching and learning, go ahead and give me the smiley face. And if it is not something that teachers currently see as major, essential, and integrated, go ahead and give me the blue confusion face. So a smiley face if it is something that's seen as essential, and the blue confusion face if it is not. And again, that's under the smiley face tab. Let me see Jason smiling. That's great. All right, so we have varying levels. And this is something, a nice quick formative assessment with emojis that we did. And this is now a good time to consider what leadership action you can take next to help your school move toward this end. So reframing the conversation around assessment. And that is something that we have emphasized, the need for clarifying the language around what assessment really is and the purpose of assessment.
So as we look ahead, let's take the final minutes now to look to our next session, Session 3, which will focus on learning progressions as key attributes of effective formative assessment. The pre-Session 3 activities include read a series of vignettes illustrating how learning progressions are used in formative assessment, review sample learning progressions, and consider how learning progressions are similar to or different from other curriculum documents, such as curriculum frameworks, scope and sequence charts, and pacing guides. Remember to set aside approximately 1 hour to complete these tasks, which may be done in smaller bite-sized segments as your schedule allows.
Okay, so let's turn to thinking about next steps for your school's implementation of formative assessment. You can choose to focus on implementing some of the strategies discussed today related to developing big ideas, learning goals, and success criteria for formative assessment purposes, or you can choose to focus on another area of implementation. The pre-session guide for Session 3 offers some suggestions to get you started thinking about this. And some of these examples of evidence are similar to what were offered for the last one. You'll be asked in the pre-session work for Session 3 to post and describe a piece of evidence showing progress on your goal, or even better, the impact of your actions, and then to read and comment on others' postings. So we ask you to think ahead now to the evidence that might be relevant to show progress with the action you identify next. And the other sections are for you to complete as soon as possible following this session. These are important to consider. What else do you need in order to do the work? Who should be brought into leading and supporting it? And how will you work with a community of practice facilitators to align leadership and learning work? And just a reminder, this is something that should be done continually, and we will be eventually holding this as part of our school portfolio for each of our schools. So we do encourage you, if you did not have the time in the pre-session, to complete some of that pre-session work for Sessions 1 and 2. And to go ahead and complete Session 3 pre-session work in advance of our next meeting.
As you take a few minutes to plan forward, consider these 5 leadership arenas: guiding change, leading professional learning, monitoring and providing feedback on progress, messaging connections to other initiatives, and sustaining efforts with enabling factors. Where will you focus your leadership efforts next?
Okay, so looking ahead, our next session is November 18th from 3 to 4:30 p.m. So in advance of that, complete your action plan and related tasks, complete today's session evaluation, and complete the pre-session 3 task. Oh no, it's catching. Okay, wonderful. And also, please be sure to complete the evaluation that I am chatting to you right now. That helps us plan for our future webinars and ensures that we know what your needs and requests are. Just a few reminders, if it has not already happened, your facilitator must send the COP dates to your MSDE liaison. We need those on our calendar. We need those for record because we have to keep documentation of everything that we do. All webinars are recorded and can be viewed on the blog or on YouTube. We do have a YouTube channel. It's very exciting. And all of our Session 3 materials will be posted by the end of the day on Monday, October 13th. So if there are any questions, please go ahead and enter them in the chat box, or you may email your MSDE liaison with any of those questions or concerns you have. Again, thank you so much for joining us today. We hope that this has been useful work, and we look forward to seeing you next time and seeing all the interesting things that you share on the discussion board. And keep posting those comments, questions, and concerns on the discussion board, because those are important things for our leadership team to think about as well. So again, thank you, and we'll see you next time.